Well, then student two, oh, did you do it a different way? Did you do it a different way? And framing those in a positive sense. And then also letting students know, hey, the way this student did it, if that doesn't make sense to you, that's okay. It's a good, valid way to do the math problem. But if this other way makes sense, you don't have to know how to do both. And in some cases, I do want them to know how to do both. But they don't have to for every problem. So students were getting some self-awareness and seeing this is the way that makes most sense to me drawing problems or doing problems. Maybe I'm somebody who needs to draw a sketch. That's personally how I tend to do math, is more of a visual sketch, even though it takes longer sometimes. That's the way that makes a lot of sense to me. For other students, it's very much calculation steps. I will show students, so I'll demonstrate how multiple students solved a problem. So while they're telling me how they solved the problem, I'm actually writing out what they said. I try to switch, and this is both self-awareness and adaptability. I try to switch my camera views, which I would do right now, but I don't have the internet ability to. But I switch from a document camera to writing on my screen. This is an online class, to writing on the board, using manipulatives, using drawings, so students can see the math problem being solved many different ways. It's teaching them that that there's many ways to do math, and their way isn't the wrong way, even if that's not the way that seems most efficient or not the way they were taught originally. And then also adaptability, in that I was really worried about my students knowing how to divide fractions on the Empower worksheet, and then getting to the GED test and saying, I don't know how to divide fractions, or being able to do it in the packet and not doing it in another scenario. So I wanted them to be able to adapt the math or adapt to different circumstances and still be able to do the math. So we spent a lot of time doing things different ways. And yes, it made us move slower. It took a little bit more time, but I thought that was something valuable that my students needed. And then with respecting differences, they get a little bit of that with listening to other students' perspectives, going into breakout rooms and working together to share problems. And then since that was something that respecting differences and respecting diversity was something that I think this particular class had less exposure to than other classes, I tried to pick materials or videos that would display diversity or had diverse presenters, not always using the same series to incorporate that in. And that's not something, that's a skill that comes a little more naturally to many of our students, especially who are coming from an ESL class transitioning into GED. But in this one, I felt like I had to be more intentional pulling some of those resources in to supplement the packet. How did my students demonstrate the skills? So Stephanie, if you want to go back to the last slide with the, or the previous slide with the 3 guiding questions. The last one is, how do my students demonstrate these skills, or what's the end product? With this class, I didn't want to build in projects for the sake of building in a project. So it says, what's the end product? That doesn't necessarily mean, well, everybody has to end up with a poster or something like that. It can be much simpler, talking about things like exit slips, doing an activity at the end on their own. With Empower, there's the test practice, and I try to have my students do the test practice as independently as possible. So throughout the class, we are doing more and more difficult problems, and we are doing problems more independently as we go along. So I can see my students getting those math skills. I may also challenge them in terms of adaptability to try something a different way. But when it comes to self-awareness, the way that I see that my students are getting that skill, every single day before they leave class, I tell them in the chat box, tell me what worked and what didn't work. So they can send it privately to me, doesn't have to go to the whole group, and they can say, I really liked it when you used the document camera. Things made a lot more sense. Or I still don't understand this. And by doing it every day, I think students were a little bit more honest with me, because the first few times they do it, most students say, yep, everything's good or everything's fine. I'll specifically say, was it helpful when I used the document camera, or did you like it better when I wrote on the board? And in the beginning, they say, oh, either way is fine. And asking them every day, students learn that you're not going to hurt my feelings by saying I hated the document camera and I want you to write on the board, because we're trying so many different things, and they're finding out what works for them, what doesn't work for them. So yeah, that's usually how I gauge skills, is exit slip questions at the end of class through the chat box in an online class. I think that's it for my activity. Does anyone have any questions about what I've talked about so far? I'm trying to look in the chat box here. Yep, Telly, I really like your comment in the chat box. If there's no questions, I'll hand it over to Steph.
So you guys got to hear me speak a little bit about the health literacy, the cost of smoking, and contextualized learning. So the first thing I wanted to show you was the lesson plan that was created in the Teaching Skills That Matter right in the toolkit. And what I wanted to kind of draw your attention to is the fact that they really look at the central skills that are taught. And so if you, let me see if I can get into that part. It's going to actually tick off the boxes. So you can see that in this lesson, they believe that you're going to be using communication skills, critical thinking skills, processing and analyzing information, and the self-awareness piece. And then, when I was looking at it, I really thought to myself, I can add the respecting differences piece, specifically because of the group that I had pulled together, and the fact that there were really great materials that I knew that existed, and that those materials existed through Great Plains Tribal Chairman's Health Board. So the other thing that I thought was excellent in these is that there's always an assessing the mastery of the objectives and the central skills piece. And so you're going to see that there was, they were going to work on a team product or an individual product. There's also the learning tool. They're going to have to do the multiplication worksheet and the graph interpretations. And then we were going to use an exit ticket as well in terms of a formative assessment. So these have all of that built right in, and I'm not going to belittle it. I'm going to go right on to my second one and talk a little bit about that if I can get this closed out without freezing. Maybe. Man, I'm sorry, it freezes up when I go that route. So I'll get it back in there while I'm talking. But the second lesson that I worked on, and that I really thought was great, I did do the one that was about eating healthy on a very limited budget. And what I think was interesting about this lesson, oh shoot, I've got to even open up some other things here to get back. But what I thought was really interesting about that lesson is that my students were all kind of talking about the ability to use or abuse some of the maybe SNAP benefits, and it had been a little bit of discussion. And so I kind of wanted to see if the students would realize or recognize the what you really get when you're on SNAP benefits, like how difficult it is to actually make that work. And so we started out by really looking at that piece, and then I am almost to mine, so give me 1 second and I will show you the lesson plan. All right, I think I'll be able to share my screen again here. Maybe. There we go. Now we're up again. Let me see if I can get that too. Wait, it doesn't want to link. There we go. All right. And so what I kind of wanted to share here is that it gives you a time approximation, which I thought was nice. And then as you're kind of going down, you can see that I'm going to identify how I can eat healthy or less healthy foods with what I've got monetarily. And I'm going to gather information about where they're sold and the cost of a meal. I'm going to work with my team to share out a visual representation. So this is a place where technology did not work as I expected it. And just like today, you just don't know how things are going to work on each and every individualized day. But one thing that I learned is that many of my students were in an apartment complex where they shared, they had Wi-Fi in the building, but the bandwidth was not big enough. Excuse me. And so what happened was, because the apartments were too close together, the students were getting all kinds of feedback. And so breakout rooms didn't work necessarily the way that we wanted them to. And so we just had to get kind of creative about how we could pull those groups together. And students were really, really supportive of that. We actually used a different kind of method. They met in small groups on their own and came in and did some work on their own, and then shared out back in Zoom, and that worked out really well. So another thing here, you can see again, central skills taught. There was the adaptability and willingness to learn, excuse me, communication skills, critical thinking, interpersonal skills, navigating systems, processing and analyzing information, respecting differences and diversity, and self-awareness. So you get a lot of information in one single lesson. And then you can see that they gave us an assessing the mastery of these skills too. So, and we did do some team products. And what we decided to do is we decided that one group of individuals would take a look at what SNAP benefits were, and then they would compare the SNAP benefits. Well, let me admit, Nikita. But what we would do is we would allow the students to take a look at what people were making on SNAP and really assess if they could eat healthy and if they could afford to buy fresh produce, fresh sources of protein on the SNAP benefits. And then another group chose to take a look at what supplemental things could help struggling families. And so that group of individuals compared what was in Feeding South Dakota boxes, what was available in the United Way or the Salvation Army boxes, and they also checked into what's in a commodities box. And then that was really actually eye-opening because we found out that some places were better to go in terms of fresh and probably more healthy options. And then the third group really took a look at what the cost would be to eat healthy every day. And it was very interesting because all three groups kind of came back to it is possible to eat healthy if you are supplementing, if you were supplementing your food stamp benefits or your SNAP benefits with some of those other ways. But it would be pretty hard to just be able to budget it on just food stamps alone. And the other thing that I thought was very interesting is that the students were really, really working collaboratively all the time. And that was a very nice component of this. And let me see if I can get back here without closing everything. Right, just doesn't want to let me go back. So when let me get back here. So in terms of the guiding questions, you know, there were tons of skills included in this lesson. What skills, if any, could be added? I didn't think that I wanted to add any additional skills because I was working with a lot of different moving pieces, and it was interesting that the students kind of directed where we went with that. The other thing is that the students really demonstrated mastery, and they demonstrated mastery by giving an end product, and they did a share out, and their presentations were excellent. They gave me a written component if they couldn't share in Zoom. And so the little written pieces were really interesting to read. And the comments that were on those were heartfelt. So I thought that that was a great way to take a look at the mastery. And the other thing, they could share that directly in the Google Classroom. And I could look at that in real time and almost see what they were doing. And that really made it very nice. Do you guys have questions, or is there anything that confused you on that? I want to give you a chance to ask, and I'll check in the chat box here.
And Steph, if you are able to, can you make me a co-host? I'm on my computer.
Oh, I will try to make you a co-host. Let's see. I'm gonna handle the chat box for a second. Telly said, let's see. There is often the idea that eating healthy costs too much, therefore it's out of reach for some. I love this lesson and how you tailored it to your students' realities. And I will say it was interesting because I had some individuals who lived much more privileged than others, and they were not aware at all what benefits actually were. And so I think it really promoted some community building as well, because the students were really excellent about kind of coming to a reality about the other students in the classroom. And it made them pretty progressive about wanting to learn more about what was available in our own community so that they could help others. So that was really great. Are there any other really burning questions?
So Telly and the other, those of you who are from corrections, that corrections training that we'll put the link to in the website, one of the teachers had done this lesson. I believe the teacher wasn't allowed to use, they had limitations on technology and things, but they brought things in like ads and said some of their individuals who had been with them since the 80s were shocked on how food prices had changed. But then they also did the activity with the things that that their students were able to buy within the prison system. So they looked at budgeting, and here's the money that you have, here's the options that we have, and are there healthy options that you can buy from their a little kind of snack store that that they had. And then they also, I'm not sure if it was this lesson or if it was a completely different lesson, but they talked about how instead of just budgeting in general, or like, you know, with my students, I might do something like a monthly budget. They talked about how do you budget for the first month after your release. You know, you leave, you have this much money, because they said that's where a lot of their individuals were kind of failing, was right when they you know, would be released, then they didn't really have the skills to, you know, how do I make that big jump back, kind of back into, you know, what would be normal for my students. So I think that you guys would really like that video, and we'll put it in the resources.
I also really love that Teresa Wrench mentioned that they use the commissary list. So I think that's a brilliant way to use that. And you're right, there are no healthy options in the prison commissary. I love that, Tim. Thank you. That's kind of funny. Yeah. How many things can you do with top ramen? And I am working on making you a presenter, Nikita. I'm just not getting that in the list of options here. So just know I'm working on it.
If you go to participants and click on the more next to my name, I think that's where you'll get it. And if you can't, that's fine. I just won't be able to share the screen again.
Why don't I take back the,
Twice, but let me try this one more time.
do you want me to reclaim the host and then I can do it for you?
I think I got it there. Let's see if that worked. Nikita, are you able to host now?
Let me see. Yes, I am.
Perfect.
I see somebody put in the chat box about looking at things like sodium content on the foods available for DOC, and that I think that would be a good way to adapt the lesson. You could also tie that in a little bit to science too.
Definitely. And we did a lot of talking about what constitutes healthy eating. And it was interesting that, you know, some people were really looking at how much protein can I get out of powdered eggs? And some people were looking at, I wouldn't touch a powdered egg. I would look for, you know, other sources of protein. And it was just interesting, like the wide variety of ideas and the wide variety of abilities, you know, or of what people would expect. And it did really draw on the idea that we had a wide range of students and that they had a wide range of experiences in their past.
And Teresa in the chat box said that she did something similar with the Empower book on estimating. So that's a really good example of how you can take something we are already using, and then either some of these skills may be built in, or you're supplementing it to build up those skills.
All right. So I think we are at a place where, there we go. I am still, Kim, I'm going to give you the option. I'm going to let you take.
I can do breakout rooms.
You can, okay, because
Yes,
I can't break people into the breakout room. So it's just not giving me the option. So
I will do that. The Midco guy was here for 3.5 hours and did a great job. So now I've got my computer back. Okay, you are getting randomly assigned to a room, and you should get the message to join the room in just a second. Oh, and before I do that, I'm going to make sure that, yep, Steph and I, we should not be in the same place.
thank you for doing that.
And actually, Steph, you and I may have to join rooms ourselves.
Perfect.
Do you want room 1 or room 2?
Sure. I'll take room 1, you take room 2.
Okay.
And I can actually see that now. So that's crazy that it just wouldn't give it to me.
Okay, and do you see how to join room 1?
Yeah. Do we have everyone back?
Mine only says 14.
Yep, I wonder if it was only our room, but I think that we should be,
Oh, okay.
oh, it's got 21 seconds left and then it will kind of pull us back in. So we'll give it just a minute. Thank you for the discussion. You guys were great. Yay, and I'm seeing people join, so I think I got that accomplished all right. All right. So in the share out, boy, I tell you what, we had some excellent discussion. And I really think that some of the things that we talked about were excellent. Nikita, do you want to start in the share out and maybe point out some things that happened in your room, and then I'll jump back in?
You know, I think the teachers in my group can probably say it better than I did. Did anybody who shared in the group want to share to the larger group what you talked about? If not, I can give a bit of a summary. Rhoda talked about the importance of vocabulary, when we're doing these things, that to make sure that students understand the language before we get into some of these lessons. And we did talk about how if you're using the TSTM toolkit part, they do have a vocabulary language demands section at the beginning that talks to you about what things you may need to pre-teach, but that there of course may be other things that that you need to clarify for your students going into the lessons. And then Telly gave some good examples of how he used an Einstein quote in his classroom. And Telly, I don't know if you want to mention, kind of give a summary of that.
Yeah, we were talking about this would be like classroom environment expectations. I like to use quote analysis under the premise that there's no right or wrong, just get people thinking. So I'll throw a quote up there from Einstein. The world we have created is not, or is a product of our thinking. We cannot change it without changing our thinking. And so I have my students write a response, whatever that is. There's no obviously right or wrong response to that. And then they end up exchanging their answer with another student, and that student comments on their partner's response, which they write directly on their paper. They hand them back, and it promotes a lot of discussion, and we can get some of that self-awareness, willingness to learn, things like that. Those skills would be present in that. But then we usually get to the point where I don't tell them it's an Einstein quote. I ask, has anybody seen it? Do they know who it is? Most of the time they do not. So I present it as Einstein. Then we talk about what people know about Einstein or think they know. And inevitably we get to the E=mc². And in my math class, of course, I'm always talking about the fact that there's a second power there. And then we talk about the variables. And then we rewrite it, and this is where I rewrite it, and I put up E=IHP. And energy, and that's our classroom energy. I call it the vibe. I always attempt to get intellectual, humorous, and positive energy. And so that's really the takeaway. It's trying to set that tone. And the idea was that there's a prison language or lingo or whatever you want to call it, that these guys kind of operate within. And I'm just trying to get them out of that and learn how to speak differently in different situations.
Thank you. Steph, did you want to share what your group talked about?
You know, I think Nick shared something that was really good, and I'll just read it right from the chat. One thing that he has done in the past is use movies. He writes questions that specifically deal with many of the soft skills mentioned. After they have a chance to write their answers, they discuss the answers and provide feedback. The lessons frequently incorporated interpersonal skills, communication, respecting differences, self-awareness, and concept of perceived walls. He also finds that this promotes a sense of community that is sometimes lacking in cell halls. So I really appreciated that. And then we kind of talked about all kinds of different challenges and navigating systems, and then how you can really know that students have mastered something when you start to hear them teach to other students. And that when that happens, there's definitely an aha moment in there. I think that it was really interesting that almost everyone could really talk about a place where they use, you know, contextualized learning, problem-based learning, or, you know, really creating a project to kind of assess learning, and that was really excellent. So I think that that's a pretty good summary of what we had. The other thing I would say is that Andrew had some nice sharing in terms of really never getting to meet people face to face, but still getting them to buy into the learning. Did anybody else have anything they wanted to share from our room? All right. Is there any questions, any burning questions, anything you want to ask from Nikita or myself? And I think I'll try to put the teaching skills that matter link back into the chat box so people have a chance to get in there and really take a look at things.
The chat information does go on to the recording that is on the website too. So that's all available with part of that.
Perfect. And I won't put it back in there because I know John shared it a few times already.
Are we ready for our drawing?
I think so.
I'm going to slaughter this name. Jorena Leframbro. Is that person here? Okay.
I think that might be Mary Rousseau.
No, that's a whole nother name.
Well, it's Laframboise is how you pronounce the name.
Is Comfort Haucon. I don't think she's on this one. Where is she? Don't see her in this one. Here we go again. Silke Hansen, I know is not. Jiminy criminy. You can tell it's random. Rhonda Leno. Is she on this one or is she in the other one? Stephanie, do you know if Rhonda's in this one?
Do we have more than one Rhonda?
I will look here. I'm gonna look.
We have
down.
Rhonda Lip on the list.
Yeah, we have Rhonda Lip. I'm not seeing Rhonda Leno for some reason, but she might have been in the ESL.
Yeah, I'm wondering that too. Boy, I've gotten all the ESL people. We're going again. Phyllis Ann Swifthawk. And we keep going. Phyllis? I know this person's in the other one too. Oh my gosh. Lynn Phillips.
I do see Lynn
I
in
see
the
Lynn.
participant list.
Excuse me?
Trying
Alexa,
to find my microphone. I'm here.
Hey, Lynn.
Yay.
Congratulations.
Winner.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm getting feedback. Did someone say they were on? Maybe chat with me if you put it.
Yes, Lynn's on. Lynn's on.
Yes, I'm here. And thank you. That'll come in handy.
I just wanted to thank everybody for participating and thank you for hanging tight with me when I had a little bit of issue in that first session. So, you know, thank you for being gracious and giving me a little grace when I was freezing up.
Leah, I'll give you
It just spun Stephanie Ripberger, and I know she's here, so she's our next winner.
Hey, Kim, you must have cut out. Lynn's online. Lynn Phillips. Can you hear me? I think we've got some technical difficulty, everyone. Lynn, we'll make sure that we follow up with Kim. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you at the student achievement and reading session this afternoon, 1:15 Central. Enjoy your lunch.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you to all.